Hello students, this is Miss Dalton, and this video is going to go over writing and graphing linear equations. So the objectives that you should expect to learn from this video is to identify the initial value, which is your y-intercept, from a table, a graph, equation, or a verbal description. Then you're going to use the slope and the y-intercepts to write a linear function in the format of y equals mx plus b from any of those representations, table, graph, or verbal description. Then you're also going to understand how to graph a linear equation given an equation. All right, so when you look at the slope-intercept form, you'll remember this as y equals mx plus b. The m stands for your slope, and the b stands for your y-intercept. So this is going to be important when you graph for sure. You'll need to know what these two letters represent. But then if they give you this information and they just want you to write the equation, well, it's going to be real easy to put it into that format. So if you look at these first two examples, it says write the equation of the line with the given slope and y-intercept. Well, these are the easiest kinds because all you have to do is take the slope and put that in for m, and take the y-intercept and put that in for b, and write your equation. So for this one, it would be y equals negative 2x plus 5. Super easy. You want all your problems to look like that because it doesn't take much time at all. Second example. You can go ahead and try it. The slope is 3/4. So go ahead and start building your equation. The y-intercept is negative 3, which is your b. So you should have y equals 3/4 x minus 3. So now let's look at writing the equation of a line in slope-intercept form when you're given a graph. So keep in mind that we still have the slope-intercept form of a line. And so there are two things that you will always need when you're writing an equation. The first is your slope, and the second is your y-intercept. So when we're looking at this graph, the y-intercept is where it crosses the y-axis. So if you see the y-axis and where it crosses, it's crossing right here. So that y-intercept is going to be equal to negative 5. Okay, then from that point, we want to now find our slope. So if you'll remember correctly, your slope is equal to what we call rise over run. So you're going to pick 2 points on the graph, and you're going to count how far you have to rise and run to get from point to point. Now I usually start with the lower point, so I'm going to start right here at negative 5, and I'm going to count how far I have to rise to get up to the point 3, negative 1. So let's count the jumps, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then to run, 1, 2, 3. So we had to go up 4 and then to the right 3. So that means my slope is a rise 4 over a run 3, and that's your slope. So then my equation is going to be y equals slope 4/3 x minus 5. All right, let's look at this next one. So for this next one, your y-intercept is again where it crosses the y-axis. So it crosses the y-axis right here at a y value of 1. So your b is equal to 1. Now let's take our lowest point and let's count our rise. So 1, 2, and then we're going to have to go backwards to get to the point 0, 1. So when you go backwards, it's going to be a negative. So it's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, negative 4. So your slope, again, is rise over run. So I had to rise 2 and run negative 4. Now let's simplify that. If you simplify that, that simplifies down to -1/2. Now our y-intercept was 1. And so now take those two pieces of information and write your equation. Y equals -1/2 x plus 1. Okay, on these next two, go ahead and try these on your own. So press pause, and then when you're ready to check your work, go ahead and press play again. All right, hopefully you're checking your answers now and you got them correct. One other thing I want to point out is that when you have, when you get your final equation, always just do some double checking. If you're going to have a positive slope, so if you're going to have a positive slope, then your line should be moving up, going from left to right. If you have a negative slope, your line should be moving down from left to right. Okay, so if I look at this number 5 slope is positive, and notice that my line is in fact going up. This number 6 slope is negative, and so it's moving down from left to right. So just kind of double check that, because where I see mistakes is when people are trying to find the slope and they mix up the positive and the negative. So I would just always double check that after you write your equation. Okay, moving on, let's learn how to write the equation of a line in slope-intercept form given a table. So the first thing that you're going to do is you're going to find the slope. So first we have to find the slope. And so what I want you to keep in mind is that when you find slope, right, we're looking for the rise over the run. Well, without graphing all of these points, we're not going to be able to count the rise over the run. So another way to find slope is to do the change in y. So for change, of course, we use delta y, and over the change in x. Okay, so let's look at our y values. Our y values are right here. Whoops. Click the eraser and not the highlighter. So our y values are there. So let's see how what they're changing by. From -3 to -1, I had to go up 2, so plus 2. From -1 to 1, we also had to go up 2. From 1 to 3, we went up 2 as well, and from 3 to 5, we went up 2. And you want to figure out the change all the way down, because again, we might have some points that are missing in between here, and we need to make sure we're getting the right values. Then now what we're going to do is we're going to look at the x values. So now we're going to see what are the x values changing by. Well, -2 to -1, that's going up 1. From -1 to 0, up 1. From 0 to 1, up 1. And from 1 to 2, up 1. So if I'm going to figure out delta or change in y over the change in x, the change in my y value is 2. The change in my x value is 1, and that's the same all the way down. So therefore, my slope is 2 over 1, which we can just write as 2. Okay, so that's the slope of that one. Now let's go ahead and figure out what the slope is of the next one. So again, we're going to go change in y. Well, from 4 to 3.5, we had to go down 0.5. From 3.5 to 3, we also went down 0.5. And from 3 to 2.5, we went down 0.5. And 2.5 to 2, again, down 0.5. Now let's look at our x values. -2 to -1 is going up 1. -1 to 0, up 1. 0 to 1, up 1. 1 to 2, up 1. So we can see that if we do the change in y over change in x, change in y is going down by 0.5, and change in x is over 1. So if I put that over 1, obviously it's just going to stay -0.5. Now we like to write the slope as a fraction, so -0.5 can also be written as -1 over 2. So I'd probably prefer that you leave it as a fraction. So that's your slope. All right, why don't you go ahead and try and figure out this next one on your own. So I'm going to pause the video, you pause the video as well, and then when you're ready to check your answer, go ahead and press play. Okay, an interesting thing is happening on this one here. Notice that if I do the change in y over the change in x here, I'm going to have 9 over 3, which simplifies to be 3. Then if I do the next one, 6 over 2, again, if you're just looking at that, you might have said, oh, well, these numbers are not the same. But if we do 6 divided by 2, that is also 3. So you can see that we're getting the same slope. Okay, let's check the next one. Well, the next one would be 9 over 3, which is the same thing as this one. And then the next one would be 6 over 2, which is the same thing as this one. So we can see real clearly that our slope is 3. So you have to be careful. Just if the numbers are not matching up, that's okay. Keep going and then compare them line by line to see if the change in y over change of x is the same. Okay, taking those same tables, we found the slope, so we're good with that, but now we also have to find the y-intercept. Well, if you look on a graph, notice that your y-intercept is always going to have an x value of 0, okay? So whatever your y-intercept is, you'll always have that x value of 0. So if you look at your table, the first thing I want you to look for is look for where there's an x of 0. Okay, if you have one in your table, well then that makes it really easy. That means that this number right here is your y-intercept. Okay, so looking at this next one, we have a 0 right here, and so that means our y-intercept is the y value of 3. In this last table, we have a 0 right here, which means that our y-intercept is -1. So now we're going to put these two pieces together, the slope and the y-intercept. So if we look back at the previous page, our slope for this one was 2. The slope for this one was that -1/2. And the slope of this one was 3. And so now if we go ahead and we write our equation, the equation for this first example would be y equals 2x plus 1. And this one would be y equals -1/2x plus 3. And this one here would be y equals 3x minus 1. All right, but what if it's not as easy as that? What if we can't find a 0 in the table for our x value? Well, our slope is still going to be that change in y over the change in x, okay? So we're still going to do that. And what we're going to do with that number is we're going to go ahead and plug it in. So we're going to fill in the m, which is your slope, into y equals mx plus b. So whatever we find here, we're going to put in this place right here. Then you're going to choose an ordered pair from the table. It does not matter which one you choose. I tend to go with the one, I try and find one where both numbers are positive. And I'm going to substitute those in for x and y, and then I will solve for b. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. If I look at this table over here, let's go ahead and find our slope. So going from 11 to 15, up 4, 15 to 19, up 4, 19 to 23, up 4, and 23 to 27, up 4. Okay, let's do the same thing over here. These are all going up by +1, +1, +1, +1. Okay, so we can see that our slope is going to be the change in y, 4, over the change in x1, which would just be 4. Okay, but now we've got to find our y-intercept. And you'll notice here, I don't have a 0. Now, we know that the 0 is going to be right here, right? If I go back 1, I'm going to be able to get to that 0. Now this one's pretty easy to just, okay, well, if I, again, I want to make sure that I'm going up by 1, which I am. So therefore, I just need to go backwards. And so subtract 4 from 11. So it should be 7, okay? Because then if I look at that, 7 plus 4 gives me that 11, okay? So it looks like my y-intercept is 7. Now, let's say this table was not as easy. Let me go ahead and walk you through these steps. So what you would do is you would do y equals, you would go ahead and put your slope in that you just found of 4, x plus, and we're going to try and find b. Again, pretending like I couldn't just go backwards in that table. Let me show you how you're going to do it. Pick whatever point you want, okay? So for this example, I'm going to go ahead and pick this first point, 1, 11, and notice that 1 is your x and 11 is your y. So what you're going to do here is you're going to go ahead and plug in those values for x and y. So y is going to go in as 11, 4, then I'm going to plug in my x value of 1, and I'm going to leave my b there because that's what I'm going to try to find now. So now go ahead and just do your algebra. 11 equals 4 times 1 is 4 plus b, and then I would have to subtract 4 to solve for b, and so therefore we see that that b is 7 that I did find here when I went backwards. But again, it's not always easy to go back to 0. Like if these points were like way higher, we wouldn't want to just keep going back. This would be a little bit faster, okay? So then, now I'm able to go ahead and write my equation. My equation for this table is y equals 4x plus 7. All right, so let's go ahead and give you your turn. I want you to go ahead and try and find the equation of the line for both of these tables right here. So I'm going to press pause, you press pause, and then when you're ready to check your answers, press play. All right, go ahead and check your work on this one. This first equation, or first table, I'm sorry, you were able to find your slope, and then you had to use the algebra to find the y-intercept. So you should have gotten y equals 4x minus 3. On the second one, it was a little bit easier because you just had to find your slope, which was -3, and then because you could find this x value of 0, then therefore that means that this 4 is your y-intercept. So the equation was y equals -3x plus 4. All right, let's go ahead and do a quick review on how to graph when you're given an equation. So when you're graphing the equations in SlopeIntercept form, which again is y equals mx plus b, remember what that stands for. You've got your slope m and you've got your y-intercept b. Well, what we're going to do is we're going to graph the y-intercept first, okay? So you're always going to graph the y-intercept first. I used to joke around with my students and say that B stands for begin. That's where you're going to begin. And then M stands for move. So after you begin at the y-intercept, then you're going to move according to your slope, rise over run, to get to your next point. So let's see how this is going to work. So if you look at your first example, y equals 2x plus 1, your m is 2, your y-intercept is 1. And so we're going to begin with 1, so we're always going to graph that on the y-axis. So we're going to put a point at 1 on your y-axis. Okay, now with your slope being 2, you always want to remember that your slope needs to be a fraction. So if you have a whole number, go ahead and put it over 1. The top number is your rise, the bottom number is your run. Okay, so from this point 1, we're going to rise 2, so 1, 2, and then we're going to run 1. Okay, now don't put a point until you're done running. You're not going to put a point after you rise. You're going to rise and run and then put your point. Now you can do that again, go up to over 1, and you can get another point, okay? Then you can go ahead and draw your line. Okay, so I'm going to try to connect the dots in a straight line, as straight as I can. Go ahead and connect those dots. Oh, that's a terrible line. But anyway, you get the idea. It's hard to draw a straight line on this iPad. Okay, let's look at the next one. So our next one, we have our slope M, and we have our y-intercept B. So our y-intercept is -2. That's where we're going to begin on the y-axis, always the y-axis. Don't put it on the x-axis. It's always going to go on the y-axis. Now, our slope is -2/3. Okay, so a lot of people are like, okay, well, it's -2/3, so which one of these points is negative? Are they both negative or just one of them? So here's what I'm going to tell you. Your negative can only be one of those numbers. One of those numbers is negative. I always make the top number negative, okay? So always make your numerator negative when you have a negative slope. If I made both of them negative, then it wouldn't be a negative slope anymore, because negative divided by negative is positive. So you can only make one number negative. I always make my numerator negative. So from this y-intercept, now I'm going to rise -2, which means I'm going to go down, and then +3. 1, 2, 3, and that's where I'm going to put my next point. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and try and draw my line. Okay, and then the other thing that you can double check is, okay, I had a negative slope. Does this line look like it is moving in a negative fashion? Yes, it's moving down. Okay, let's look at the other one. The other one had a positive slope. Is this line moving in a positive direction? Yes, it's going up. So always double check that, because if you've graphed the slope wrong, like maybe you accidentally made both of them negative. Well, if you made both of them negative, you're going to see that your line's going to move in a positive direction. And that's kind of a red flag that you've done something wrong. So just always check that. All right, last one. I know this is a long video, so I'm trying to talk fast, but this is our last one. Okay, so here we're going to graph an equation that is not in slope-intercept form. If we look at this, right, we don't have our y by itself. Our y equals mx plus b. That's what the format that we need it in. Okay, so we've got to get it in that format. So we've got to solve for y. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add 8 to both sides. That's going to get this to cancel. So I'm going to have 4y equals 2x plus 8. Then, to get my y by itself, I'd want to divide by 4. Now you want to divide everything by 4, so I'm going to go ahead and split it up and divide everything by 4. That cancels, so you'll have y equals, now 2 over 4 could simplify to be 1/2. Put your x there. And then 8 divided by 4 is 2, so plus 2. Then at that point, now we can graph just like we did before. This is my slope. This is my y-intercept. I'm going to begin with my y-intercept. So I'm going to begin at 2 on the y-axis. Then I'm going to rise 1 and run 2 and put my next point. I could do it again, rise 1, run 2, rise 1, run 2, and that will give me a few more points to try and draw a straight line. Again, having a hard time connecting those dots, but you get the idea. Again, it is a positive slope, which means it should be moving up, and my line is, and so I've double checked it. All right, thank y'all for holding with me. This is just a review over writing linear equations. If you have any questions, please let me know.